Knowledge education, of course, necessary, but that's not the most fundamental thing that we need. And I think during King's Report, right? I gave the example of Bill Gates. Is Bill Gates a successful person?
Financially.
Well, but there's the story, perhaps apocryphal, that when John D. Rockefeller died, someone went up to his accountant and said, "So how much did he leave behind?" And the guy said, "Well, I think he left all of it." So when Bill Gates goes to the spirit world, he's not going to take any of his money with him. He's not going to take his gadgets with him, right? He can't take his operating system with him. He's not going to take any of his computers with him or his cell phone or anything like that. He's going to take his love with him. But we see recently that his marriage failed, and that actually now it's turning out that he had a string of affairs with women around him. So he was another example of how power corrupts. And, just because he happened to have more money than anybody else, so he felt entitled to be unfaithful to his wife or to not have a faithful marriage, which was, not really, something that was centered on God in the first place. So from the aspect that we're supposed to be spending our lives here preparing for the next life, Bill Gates is a failure. Jeff Bezos is a failure. Because he also recently went through a divorce, and his marriage failed as well. So these people, it's fine, but they gave jobs to a lot of people and stuff like that. But when they get to the spirit world, they're going to discover that they have not done the most essential thing, which is to go through the four realms of Shimjung. The irrepressible love of a child, sibling, a husband and wife, and a parent. They're going to be surprised, and maybe people are surprised when they get to spirit world. Not the least of it, because sometimes often they don't even realize that there is such a thing as spirit world. But that is our end goal, and so if you don't accomplish that, then you're really not accomplishing anything. Oops, here I fiddled with my cable again. Okay, there we go. Okay, I've got to be careful with that. All right, so more fundamental than anything is the idea of the completion of the character, completion. But in order to do that, of course, you have to have a spouse who's going to help you. And you have to help her or him also, because we cannot reach completion alone. Shimjung of the husband or wife, and Shimjung of parent, is not something that we can do alone. So let's go now to the final human revolution. We've had the Industrial Revolution. We've had political revolutions. We've had religious revolutions. We've had cultural revolutions. Well, did they solve the problems? Well, no, they didn't. Let me get my pointer out again. And have they created a unified world of peace? No. And again, unified does not mean that everyone, same cookie cutter type of thing, but no, just that everyone is pointed in the same direction. That we're not pointed against each other, but we're working with each other to create a world of peace. So in other words, we have God as our common parent, and we understand the purpose of creation, and we are all working together to accomplish God's purpose of creation. So did they create a world of happiness, a happy world? No, they didn't. And they're not going to. This international, panel on climate change, IPCC, they announced their most recent, I think they said groundbreaking report. Right? Have you seen the ground break? No. They say that's what they're calling, groundbreaking report on on climate change. We got to hold it to 1.5 to 2 degrees above pre-industrial revolution levels, or else, boom, we're all going to die. They're not going to create a world of peace. They're not going to create a world of happiness, especially with their top-down, globalist, communist, fascist way in which they are trying to govern the world. So, human revolution, though, is that, and in past revolutions have been done by guns, swords, and force. But how will the human revolution take place? True education, because God is not a dictator; He's an educator. And throughout all these millennia, He's been, in hundreds of thousands of years, He's been trying to educate human beings. Don't eat of the fruit. That was education. The laws of Moses. That was education. Right? The gospel, that's education. All the prophets that came in the Old Testament, education, education, education. And not only that, but God is actually speaking to all of humanity all the time, 24/7. Someone asks me, do you think that God speaks to you? I would say, yeah, He does. In fact, I think He speaks to you as well. I think He speaks to all people. He's speaking to all people 24/7, but just that we don't always have the ears to hear. He can speak to us all He wants, but we have to have the ears to hear. And if you think He doesn't exist, that certainly does not help, right? Because then you're not even listening. How can you listen to someone? How can you hear someone when you don't even think that they exist? So it's been a difficult process, and yet God has brought us to this point, where we had Jesus coming. And would have been great if everything could have been accomplished then, but it wasn't, so He promised to return. And He has returned. He did return. And He went through, let's see, what is it now? 1935 to 2012. What's that, 77 years of work here. And especially 67, if you take it from 1945, the beginning of Father's public ministry, 67, right? 67 years. And He accomplished all the conditions that are necessary for Cheonryuk to be established. So there's no reason for the Messiah to come again. One thing, He's established all the conditions. Second thing is that He has a physical son who is also His disciple, who is present on earth now. That is the second king, Hyungjin Moon, who is on the earth, who is representing Him and through whom He can work. Jesus didn't have that. He had spiritual sons, His disciples, but they were not His direct sons. They were adopted sons. So the Messiah does not need to come again, but He is now also, because now the position of Adam, position of Eve, position of Cain and Abel have all been established. So now we are at the starting line since almost 4 years ago now. So how will the human revolution take place? Through education, true education. And true education means, first of all, educating the character and helping a person to reach that point where he can receive the blessing. And then the second stage, the family, and then knowledge education on top of that. But it does not have to go, one like that. But there can be a lot of overlap there. So what will be the true instruments of the human revolution? The true love and principle with their source in Shimjong, the human revolution. So it takes place through education. So what about all these, the rod of iron that we talk about? Well, that's for self-defense. And we're protecting our families, we're protecting the kingdom, because right now the kingdom is very, very small, and there will be forces that may try to take it by force. And so we are willing to offer our lives if necessary, so as to protect that kingdom and our families here. Okay. So Shimjong revolution is the root, and from there, true love, that's the flowers and fragrance, and then true character is like the fruit, and then absolute sex revolution, a true family. So this will be the final human revolution that will take place and will actually bring about a world of peace. People talk about the danger of a utopian thinking. And in the past, utopian thinking was dangerous because it was always a kind of a top-down situation that someone was trying, okay, here it is. Here's my ideal for the world, and I'm going to force you to accept this. That kind of utopian thinking certainly is dangerous because it is despotic, it is tyrannical. But God's utopian thinking is the opposite. First of all, because he created the world, and so his design is what's now being effected, and it's from the bottom up. It's bottom up, and it has to be voluntary. People have to make the voluntary choice to enter the kingdom of heaven. You can't take a person dragging in, you can't drag a person kicking and screaming into the kingdom of heaven. Although there is a temptation to do that sometimes, but person has to choose on their own. So, okay, yeah, I'll go this way. And that voluntary choice is what God wants and desires, and that is the purpose of the education. But that is also the reason why he will not intervene in our portion of responsibility. And that's a tough one sometimes, but that's necessary. You cannot force someone to accept God or his truth. The relationship between God and the creation. So God, can you see all that? Probably not, huh? Let me use my... Oh, you have the book? Okay, that's right. Okay. I was going to use my handy-dandy thingy here, but anyway. All right, so, well, let me do it anyway, just for fun. Okay. Okay. So God has internal nature and external form. We say that he has dual characteristics of internal nature and external form. This is between the two dual characteristics. This is the more fundamental one, the primary one. And internal nature we refer to in Korean as Songsang, and external form we refer to as Hyongsang. We keep using the Korean terms because internal nature is very sort of a ballpark translation. It's good enough, but for now, but Songsang and Hyongsang. Okay. And then each of these has yang and yin. Yang here is symbolized by the plus sign and yin by the negative sign, minus sign. So, easy to understand. Human beings, we all have bodies. Some of us have a male body, some of us have female bodies. So that we have two dual characteristics. One is the internal nature is to form, other is a yang and yin, but one is more primary than the other. So with his principle of creation, he creates all things, and he has developed individual truth bodies. Each truth body is unique. No one in the past looked like me, and no one in the future will ever look like this particular Tim Elder. I am unique, past and present and future. I know there's maybe some people who look extremely similar to me, perhaps, but not exactly. Now, human beings are created in the image of God, but all things, in other words, all things refers to all of creation aside from human beings, and that would include the angels, by the way. All includes all things are like the symbol of God, the image of God, which can be compared to like a map. This is the image, whereas the symbol would be kind of like the flag of a country would be a symbol, right? So there is a distinct difference between human beings and the rest of creation. There are a number of ways in which we are different from the rest of creation. For one thing, we have a portion of responsibility. Others don't. We exist both in the spirit world and in the physical world. We act as mediators between the two. Other parts of creation don't. Cats and dogs, they don't have spirit selves. So now human beings have a mind and body. All things have an inner nature and also an outer form. So then, let's see, let's bring this back down. How do I do that? Okay. So in this, let me see, what can I do this? Oh, I can't do that. No, I can't, okay. I got to do it this way, okay. So the relationship here between the two is that God is the subject partner, and all created things, including human beings and all the rest of creation, are all the object partners in this relationship with God. God is the cause, we are the result of creation. He is external, he is internal, we are external. He is vertical, creation is horizontal, and God is invisible, and the creation is tangible and visible. So God is in the masculine subject, and he's a feminine object of status, or status. I like to use the word status, not necessarily position. Now, human beings in all things now, human beings, some of the things that make us unique is that we can imitate, we can use our voice box to imitate almost any other creature in creation. You ever heard someone make a duck call? Lisa, she was very good at this, wasn't she? I miss her. Lisa Ellenson was very good at sounding like a duck. In fact, most ducks believed her. They were sure that they were going to get some absolute sex if they just went to that duck call, but they didn't. They got something else. Yeah. Whereas a dog cannot make a sound like a cat. Maybe some can, but then it gets on TikTok and gets 1 million views if that ever happens. So they can only make their own sounds, and we are able to possess all things, and they have their own elements and qualities, and the creation is designed and created to resemble human beings. We have hair on our body, and so the plants resemble that, plants of the earth. We have skin, just like the earth has crust. We have muscles, like the earth has substrata. We have veins, like the earth has these underground waterways. We have a skeleton, like the earth has a rocky mantle. And we have bone marrow, like the earth has a molten core. So this is a God, and human beings and all things are in this kind of a relationship. So human beings are in a very unique situation, and that's another reason why it is very destructive to God's ideal to think of human beings as having evolved from apes or from creation. Yeah. So looking at the I Ching in the Bible, the I Ching, the Book of Changes, that was really sort of popular in the United States in the 1960s, 70s, for studying Eastern philosophy and perspective of principle of creation. The I Ching, or the Book of Changes, believes in a great ultimate. This is how they see sort of this is their sort of primitive understanding or pagan understanding of God. And so they have yin-yang, and they have from the yin-yang comes the 5 elements in all things, and from the Tao, which is the way, 1 yang and 1 yin, this is the way, is one of the quotations from Taoism, and the way is the word. And in the Bible, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, so also through the Word God created all things. And so this slide attempts to make that connection between the Eastern philosophy and the biblical teachings. So, but the principle has God with 2 sets of dual characteristics, and this makes it. This is important because, as you'll see, this is how you get a personal God, a God of character, a God of personality. The fundamental issues of the I Ching in the Bible are explained by the principle of creation, allowing for the unification of Eastern and Western philosophy, because I Ching, you have Te, which is the great ultimate. And the I Ching does not have a concept of an internal nature and external form. It only has the concept of a yang and yin. In fact, they reverse it, saying yin and yang. So it cannot explain that God is a being of a personality. Whereas in the Bible, there is no dual characteristics either way. So God the Father explains that God has personality, but does not explain God's attributes. And so it is in that sense that we say that OSDP and the divine principle in general, our Father's teaching in general, gives people a much clearer view of God, so that people can develop a much closer relationship with God. And that's what is important, because that's the first thing that is necessary to to develop a world of peace. If we don't really have certain knowledge, we don't know God with a certainty, if we're still doubting, does he exist? Does he not? We're not going to create a world of peace. But everyone in the world has to have that certainty of God's existence for us to have a world of peace. Now, the UN, the IPCC can do all they want. It's not going to work. And then the theory of, wait a second, I'm sure I changed that. Oh, okay. I changed this to, I don't know how that change didn't get through here. I used the word ontology here, okay? Western and Eastern ontology from the perspective of principle of creation. Oh, where's Carrie? Okay, we'll tell her later.
What did you change it to? I think I supposed to.
So the Eastern and Western, or Western and Eastern ontology from the perspective of the principle of creation. I explained in the beginning that Poncheron is actually a Korean translation, or Chinese/Korean/Japanese translation of ontology, and how in the 19th century they were trying to import the term ontology from English and German into the Asian languages. And this is one of the words that they decided to use, to create. And here, we should use that word here. I wonder what happened. So anyway, Western ontology, here let's use ontology rather than that. Here, forms and material. We're referring here to the ancient Greek philosophers' ontology. So forms and material, Plato, Aristotle talked about these kinds of things. They had some idea of God's dual characteristics of internal nature and external form. And then the Eastern ontology with the yin and the yang have some idea of God's dual characteristics of yang and yin. So uniting these together then brings that. But that does not mean that Father went and grabbed this from here and grabbed this from here and created it. No. And actually, this is the one correction I would make to Richard's presentation yesterday. Father did not come up with a divine principle by studying the Bible. Okay? No, he got the principle from God. Now, in order to help people understand it, he would go through the Bible. And in fact, if you ever saw Father's Bible, it was he was underlined all the way through. But he could go through the Bible and say, "Oh, look here! Already God has already taught this," and just that people didn't realize it. So he certainly knew the Bible. In fact, he knew the Bible better than I would say anyone. But he did not get his teaching from the Bible. He got his teaching from God. Thank you, Carrie. In what number are we on? 144. I don't know how this change didn't make it into the book. It concerns me a bit because I wonder what else didn't make it. But in 144, I know I changed the title of that. And I know I used ontology instead of original substance. So it should be Western and Eastern ontologies from the perspective of the principle of creation. And also, then also below that, you have original substance in the West. Let's make that Western ontology, and then below that, Eastern ontology. Okay? All right. So, so Father's talking about then uniting Western and Eastern culture. Father sees that God's truth is not all communicated to just one place. All right, sure, he has his main thing, like Christianity, and a lot of it is communicated in Korean tradition, although Korean tradition is pagan. So, okay, if we're going to go only with Korean tradition, then men should have many concubines, right? If we're going to go with Korean tradition. Yeah, Korean tradition is not itself God's tradition, okay? I used to have fun with Korean people. Yeah, one of the reasons perhaps I don't live in Korea anymore. Anyway, Western, so also Western culture has received a lot of God's truth, and the Constitution of the United States would be one of the ways in which God's truth was communicated to Western culture. The whole idea that we have inalienable rights that come from God, not from government. This is a truth of God that has not been communicated to Eastern culture, but it is communicated to Western culture. So there are parts of each that need to come together, but coming together centering on God's truth being taught in the OSDP. So then we can create a unified culture. Yeah. People in the East need to understand that God did not give the right of gun ownership only to Americans. Right? Did God only love Americans? No. So when I speak to a group of Japanese, I say, "Do you have a Second Amendment right in Japan?" And they say, "No." And I said, "Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You do have that right, just that your government does not allow you to exercise that right. Your Constitution, your laws don't allow you to exercise the right, but you do have the right, because that right is from God, not from your government, and it is inalienable. No one can take it away from you. You cannot give it up." Yeah. Slavery also in Korea ended when Protestantism came to Korea, and this whole idea of men in the scholarly class having concubines also ended when Christianity or Protestant Christianity came to Korea. So there is a kind of a unification of a culture going on there. But also we have a lot to learn from Eastern culture, particularly Korean culture, but also from Japanese culture as well. All right, so then any questions before we go to universal prime energy and other stuff like that? Okay, then let's go. We started at 1 o'clock, right? Okay, I want to maybe try to be a little bit more aware of the time. I say that, but universal prime energy, give and receive action, and the four-position foundation. All right, existence requires energy, and universal prime energy is the fundamental force for God's existence. So God too cannot exist without energy or a fundamental force. And also, universal prime energy is a causal force that gives rise to the energy that allows all created beings to exist. So that we're talking about two different things here. One is the universal prime energy, and then I think we're going to come a little bit later on. But anyway, right now we're talking about the force, the fundamental force that allows for God's existence, and this requires a give and receive action. And that's why there are dual characteristics, because there's always then flowing and moving like this in God. Okay, so when there's no energy, then there's not going to be this kind of existence with God. Without exception, all existences require energy and force in order to exist. This is true for God as well. God himself requires a force in order to exist. Universal prime energy is the fundamental force that generates the energy required by all beings created by God for their own existence. So we're talking about universal prime energy that is what allows God to exist, but also that generates another energy that is required by all beings. Because God is absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging, the force of God's existence, namely universal prime energy, is itself absolute, unique, eternal, and unchanging. All right? We clear on that? Yeah. Then give and receive action. For a long time we translated this as give and take, but I'm glad we switched to give and receive, because that's what it is. We're not taking, all right? We're giving, but we're also receiving. So universal prime energy, okay, centering on universal prime energy, we have a give and receive action between the internal nature, which is in the subject position, and in the external form, which is in the object position. SS is Songsang, HS is Hyongsang. And then this gives rise to the energy that allows for existence, multiplication, and action of all things. So here, universal prime energy is causal, subject, and internal. And then through that give and receive action, then there's a force of give and receive action and this creates an effect, which is object position, object partner position, and it's an external. So in the worldly poncheron, that's what we're studying, the original substantive divine principle, which is the unification principle, when Seungsang and Hyongsang establish a reciprocal relationship, right? They're reciprocating with each other to form a reciprocal common base. The phenomena of giving and receiving something takes place. This phenomena is what we call give and receive action. There has to be a reciprocal, common base. We have to have a common base. For example, language gives us a common base. Right? If I were here talking to you in, let's see, some of you speak Korean, but suppose I talked to you, gave this lecture in Japanese. Right? There's no reciprocating, right? You're just sitting there, right? So I'm talking, but there's no reciprocating going on. There's no give and receive going on. But because I'm speaking in a language that you understand, you're able to receive it and then also give back and ask questions. So that language is an example, common language is an example of a reciprocal common base. And there are other, you can think of other examples as well. Yeah. For example, if you have an interest in the same thing, two people are talking about fishing. Well, a person who's very interested in fishing, talking to a person who couldn't care less about fishing, there's no reciprocal common base there. And that conversation is not going to go very well. Yeah. There has to be a reciprocal common base there. So, and then the phenomenon of give and receive, receiving something takes place. And this is what we call give and receive action. And this is where then, this is important, but that's where the energy for existence, multiplication, and action comes from. This is what is taking place here within God. Here, when we say two partners establish a reciprocal relationship, we mean that they face toward each other. They don't have back-to-back, right? And when they say that they form a reciprocal common base, we are saying that they establish a reciprocal relationship centering on a common purpose, then engage in give and receive action and exist by establishing a reciprocal common foundation. Okay, so then, right? So it has to be, so centering on God's, the purpose would be God's shimjong, and then the internal nature and external form, forming a reciprocal give and receive action, centering on God's shimjong, that irrepressible love, and then then we have the unified or unique body. Okay. And then two preconditions necessary for give and receive action. In order for give and receive action to be engaged, there are two preconditions. First is that a center must be established prior to give and receive action. So always, Father was always talking about center. What's centering on this, centering on that. And I did a Google search one time on the Korean edition of Google, centering on, to see how it's used in, common Korean vernacular conversation. Well, 90% of the results were all from Father, or from someone quoting Father. So this is kind of his his trademark, I suppose. And unfortunately, in the translation, the translators say, we want to have a better English style, and so they edit that out. But that's bad. That's one of the things that tells you, okay, this really is Father's speech. If If you can go through a whole speech without one single centering on, you know, hey, this is fraud. This is a fake speech, or at least it feels like it. Center, there has to be a center. So what are you going to center it on? You're going to center it on God. You're going to center it on God's purpose. You're going to center it on Satan. You're going to center it on what? You're going to center it on yourself. What are you going to center it on? Second condition, following the completion of give and receive action, he said result must appear. There has to be a result. So just a sort of a misfire, kind of a give and receive action without a result would be like a misfire, wouldn't it? A reciprocal action that involves no center or no result is nothing more than reciprocal action. It is not give and receive action. The center of give and receive action between God's attributes is in some cases 심정, in other cases purpose. So when it is a 심정, then it is a unified body, a harmonized body. When it is purpose, then the result is a multiplied body, a new life body. When 심정 is the center, the result is a unified body like this, and when it is purpose is the center, it's a multiplied new life body, a new baby or a new tree or a new animal. Right? Properties and features that give and receive action in any situation or at any time, give and receive action displays fullness, harmony, and fluidity. And this principle is very important for us to understand human relations and how to diffuse difficult situations. So get the center onto God. Get the center on God. You know? For example, when we sit down with someone wants to talk to us, and so okay, well, first let's pray. Then already, boom, you're making God the center of that conversation. And then you can have a give and receive action, and then hopefully there will be a good result from that conversation. So that's prayer in that instance is very important in placing God at the center of that conversation or of that relationship. So also if families pray together, husband and wife pray together, putting God at the center of that relationship of the family, of the husband and wife. And then things can go much better than they might otherwise. So all beings are relational beings. All beings are relational beings. Yeah. Why are they relational beings? For the sake of give and receive action in development. Because without give and receive, you don't have energy. And without energy, you don't have existence. You don't have multiplication, you don't have action. And so God created things as relational beings, in other words, as subject and object beings, so that there could be this give and receive action, so that there could be multiplication, there could be action. So then subject, partner, object, partner, human beings, parents and children, husband and wife, teacher and student, superior and subordinate in a company. There's the supervisor and the supervised, employer and employee, and there's one that we always have trouble with, government and citizens. And we talked with Reverend Yu, and okay, well, here we have an asterisk. The government connotes here as the Constitution of the United States of Cheongguk. Okay, we'll live with that. And this is one of the things that God has revealed to the West that Eastern Asian people especially need to learn, which is that government is not in the subject position, not in the subject partner position. And you can tell, when the family pledge, what does the family pledge say? Our government, the center of Cheongguk, or the owner of Cheongguk, is that what it says? No? Our government, the owner of Cheongguk. Not what it says, right? So the government is a creation of the citizens. So the citizens are the creator, and the government is the created being. So it would seem to me a problem to say that the created being is in the subject position and the creator is in the object partner position. Now, Reverend Yu would say, but you have a president who is always praying for his people and is always working for his people and sacrificing himself for these people and things like that. Yeah, but actually the representative of true parents on earth is not the president; it's the king. Yeah. And the president is chosen by the people. The king is not chosen by the people. If you look at the Chinese Constitution, and the king is chosen by God, but also by the previous king. So the king is in that lineage that starts with true parents. The president of a country is chosen by the people in the Constitution through the House of Representatives. So I know we have this asterisk, and we're trying to sort of fit this square peg into a round hole there, I feel. But anyway, this is, I think, an example of where East Asian people need to learn what God has revealed to the West. Yeah. So in animals, you have a male and female, and obviously there's a give and receive between male and female, and that's what produces more animals, right? In plants, you have stamen and pistil. In minerals, you have the positive charged ions and the negative charges. And the planets revolving around the sun, and the moon revolving in the earth, and earth around the sun, and the subject-object positions. Okay, and then here, arteries and veins, also in subject-object, or inhalation, exhalation, subject-object. And also in Bible, Matthew 7:2, the judgment to be give will be the measure, that will be the judgment you receive. The measure you give will be the measure you receive. Okay. So the Bible is full of these kinds of examples, and Matthew 7 is one of those examples. As long as I have my Bible here, why don't we just look it up? Come on now. Matthew 7. Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considered not the beam that is in thine own eye, and so forth. So this is a give and receive, give and receive, give and receive. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's also a kind of a give and receive action that is given in the Bible. And that give and receive action is created by God so as to have multiplication, so as to have energy, so as to have action in the world. Because if we were all just sitting here, right, then what fun is that? Again, solitary confinement is considered a very inhumane form of punishment for that reason, because you cannot have give and receive action with anything. So action of conscience from the perspective of give and receive action, the force of conscience is generated by give and receive action, and acts upon all people, guiding them toward goodness. And true subject partner, and the true subject partner of the conscience is God. Okay. Now, we have original human beings and we have fallen human beings. With original human beings, the conscience is fully aligned and connected to the truth. And so, yes, the conscience drives people towards God. But in the fallen human beings, the conscience is actually connected to a mistaken understanding of the truth. For example, the good of the Communist Party, right, to give an extreme example. The good of the Communist Party, that's what we want, or something like that. And also, one of the reasons that we have so much division in America today is because people have a different understanding of the truth. They mistakenly, so it has to be the educated conscience. Again, God is not a dictator, he is an educator, so he's always educating. Yeah. So with that then, when it's connected to the mistaken understanding of the truth, then it can go in the lead people in a mistaken direction. But then, when actually many of our early members in Japan and also in the United States are reformed communists, or reformed Marxists, or reformed liberals, because they come to a better understanding of the truth and say, wow, this is actually what I wanted in life. This is the truth that I was looking for. And then they become some of the most fervent and loyal members once they realize that. Yeah. And fall and salvation from the perspective of give and receive action. So in completed human beings, God and human beings like this, but then in the fall, human beings cut off our relationship with God and instead formed a relationship with Satan. And that was also then a give and receive action was formed with Satan. So salvation then is a human being that has a relationship with the Messiah, that God sends his Messiah to the earth as the new Adam. First Adam didn't work out, so sending another Adam, and also as the sort of the visible God that people can see and relate to. He's the way, the truth, and the life. And so human beings form a give and receive action with that Messiah, and that Messiah himself is having a give and receive action with God. And then human beings then are able to cut off that relationship with Satan and receive salvation in this way. So action of the original mind and the conscience from the perspective of give and receive action is that God and the original mind is that latent understanding of goodness that is within all of us. Even the most evil person still has that original mind, which is the latent understanding of goodness. And for example, you see that criminal leaders, mafia leaders, will still want their children to grow up not in the family business, but to become good people, because they know that what they're doing is wrong. And so then God is in the subject position to the original mind, which is in the object partner position. But then the original mind then is in the subject partner position to the human body, and then the body being the object partner position. And so then this is how in the completed human being, then in the original human being, the original mind acts where God works through the original mind to be with that person. And God's Shimjong then is then also communicated that way. And the conscience then also then precedes one's parents, precedes one's teacher, and precedes God. Because the conscience knows us better than even our parents or our teachers, and even better than God, our Father said. Yeah. And but when we feel the pang of conscience, this is when we are doing something that we know is wrong. Okay? And then the four-position foundation, we have the center and the subject position, the object position, and then the result, the reciprocal action. Because the give and receive action between Songsang and Hyongsang is accompanied by a center and a result, give and receive action always establishes these four positions. The center, Songsang, Hyongsang, and then the result. According to the expression, four-position foundation refers to the spatial manifestation of Songsang and Hyongsang that results through their give and receive action, centering on the center. So actually, this is how God created space. Time and space. Talk about time and space. We'll talk about time in just a minute, but there's space. Yeah. So always there is the center and there is the result, and then there is this a reciprocal relationship between a subject partner and an object partner, making the four-position foundation. And then we come to origin, division, union, action, and the three objects purpose that Kerry was asking about, and the four-position foundation. So an origin, division, union, action actually is how God created time. Yeah. All phenomena have both a spatial-related and time-related nature. When we describe the give and receive action between the four elements, that's center, subject, object, and result, in spatial terms, we call this the four-position foundation. However, when we describe their give and receive action in time-related terms, we call this origin, division, union, action. And origin, division, union, action refers to the temporal manifestation of subject and object that results from their give and receive action centering on the center. So here the center, or God, you can say, divides himself or projects himself into the world as, like, let's say, for example, a man and as a woman, and they have a reciprocal relationship, and the result is a child, or the result is that relationship. So here, then God is then this result then is also relating directly to God. So the origin, this is absolute, and division is relational. So there's a relationship between there, and union is a harmonized union. So this is where Marxism gets it wrong, right? Because Marxism says that they're not reciprocal relationship, but struggle relationship between two things. This is what brings about a synthesis. Their understanding is that you have a thesis, you got your antithesis, because a thesis always contains a contradiction within itself, they say. So that antithesis within the thesis at the beginning is small, and in, like, for example, the workers, right, within the company, and the capitalist is strong, but the workers grow and they grow and they grow and they unite and they put all their forces together, and finally they're able to overcome the capitalists, and boom, they have a revolution, and they have a new synthesis, which is the proletariat, the rule of the proletariat. But here we're saying that the Father's saying that no, subject and object are harmonized, centering on a common center. They're not contradicting each other. They are working together, centering on a common center. But each of them is a different projection from God. Different projection from God. So in the case of a company, then the owners, let's say the owners and the employees are subject and object position, you can say, but they are not in conflict when they are centered on a common purpose. Purpose would be for the development of the company, And then the result then would be a higher financial result. So that is a fundamental difference between Father's teaching and leftist, Marxist teaching, such as in critical race theory. Critical race theory tries to create that kind of struggle relationship, contradictory relationship between two things here. But no, that's not the case in Father's teaching. No, that the people just have to come together, centering on a common purpose, and then the result will come. And then origin, division, union, action as well. See? This relationship. This is a relational division. It's a division, but it's relational, and they're working toward a common purpose. They can create a new life body, a new result. So origin, division, union, action is the action in which God stands in the origin position, and division extends from him, with the division next being reunited again in oneness. So, so a new sort of something that resembles God is created, and this is the way that the things are multiplied in the world. And here there's a satanic theory. Here we have thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Marx took this from Hegel, but kind of twisted it from Hegel. And then this is where really that is the thing that has been tyrannizing humanity for almost 200 years now. But we need to understand that God's principle is origin, division, union, and the division is not a contradictory division. It is a reciprocal division, and then union. And here they have a new synthesis. So this is the dialectic. This is the material dialectic here. Confrontation is struggle or hatred. So they say, oh no, love trumps hate, love trumps. But they are creating hatred, and they are utilizing hatred for their own political purposes. And this is the example that we have in dialectical materialism and Feuerbach's materialism and Hegel's dialectic. These two were sort of fused together by Marx. But here in Father's teaching, it's the law of give and receive. Give and receive action is love. Give and receive type, oneism, and development through 3 stages. So this is development. So development does not take place through struggle, as Marxism says. Instead, development takes place by harmonious reciprocal action centering on a common purpose. Yes, Carrie?
Yeah, it's just reflecting as you were talking about the point of Father saying center. It's how that appears so often in his speeches, and I was just thinking, comparing, satanic theory and God's principle, that in reality, when even though people may be working together centered on God, the reality is life is messy, and there can be conflict in people's relationships and conflict within an organization. But that's why the center is so critical, because if you really are centered on God, then you keep going until you get to that harmonious place. And how, with critical race theory, that the center is that there's a basic oppressed and an oppressor. So no matter how much you may like somebody else or how much you may work together, the center is something which is split.
Yeah.
So it just reaffirms, really highlighted for me when you talked about what we center on.
Right. We can have a difference of opinions. But as long as we are focused on a common center, then we can develop. Yes, Scott.
Hello. My 2 cents, going back to 1965 with some experience with Dr. Timothy Leary, they always bandied, the group, the people, the community, always bandied about the word center yourself, center yourself, center yourself, with no explanation, of course. And it took me years finally to, this is my understanding and belief, to be centered means to have mind-body unity. Now you can do something. That's what I got.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you. All right, thank you. Let's take a break, and we'll come back at 2:10, I guess. Yeah, we'll come back at 2:10 and continue. Thank you.